Hi, everybody, and welcome to Season 2, Episode 6 of the NSIC Weekly Podcast brought to you by D2Football.com. My name is Tom Frederick. I've covered the University of Sioux Falls for 26 years now. Think of me today as your Pat Summerall to that guy's John Madden. Coming up next, 60 Minutes, followed by an all-new Murder, She Wrote. I'll have you know that's Wit's dated reference. That's not mine. That's all him today. Matt Woodwicki has been an avid follower of small college football ever since playing softball with a number of former players decades ago. He has served as the Northern Sun Conference's columnist, I guess you could call it, for D2Football.com for the last 10 years now. Oh, wise one, we are a month into this 2023 football campaign. Give us your hot takes on what you've seen thus far.
Well, Tom, I think the clear-cut favorites have kind of taken care of business so far, and it's taken about 4 weeks of action for us to kind of finally get to what I would consider to be some of the marquee games this fall, and I'm really excited in the pick'em this week to have some of those popping up, and we'll kind of go from there.
Well, on today's big show, we will discuss what happened week 4. We'll take a peek behind the curtain on this weekend's big tilts and welcome a top secret guest to discuss the NSIC's best rivalry game, which is
Key to the City game
between Augustana and Sioux Falls. He said that. I didn't. I'm not a homer. He's the guy who came up with that one.
Don't sell yourself short. You're quite the homer, but living in Sioux Falls, there's not a game that I look forward to any more on the calendar than this one. It's been a lot of energy in this matchup, ever since its infancy. And I love seeing some of the venom and the pettiness between the sides and the fan bases. I'm all here for it. So I'm looking forward to a great atmosphere on Saturday as well.
What do you say we get this party started with a look at the week that was? As always, the NSIC has cited 3 players for their production on the field in games of September 23rd. And I'm going to start with the man in the middle, the guy on defense, Bemidji senior linebacker Max Baduras. He's from Shorewood, Illinois. He had 11 tackles, including a sack, as the Beavers of Bemidji mauled Mary 41-10.
Yeah, Max is a great player, leading tackler on what I feel is the best defense in the conference.
We'll go to special teams next. UMD kicker Curtis Cox. He's a senior out of Dodgeville, Wisconsin. He was perfect from placement in the Bulldogs' 33-0 shutout over in Marshall. He nailed 3 PATs and got between the pipes field goals of 21, 33, 38, and 40 yards. Curtis Cox.
Yeah, as you know, Tom, I'm a big special teams guy, but these were big kicks for them because their offense, was kind of sputtering a little bit at times. Wall Jasper didn't have kind of the day he normally has on the ground. So these field goals kind of help propel them out to a pretty comfortable lead.
So UMD's offense and USF's offense, a week after playing each other, each sputtered. Go figure. Nick Bowen, the man on the left there, the junior signal caller from Wayne State College. He's out of Bennington, Nebraska. He's earned Offensive POW, Player of the Week honors for a second consecutive week. All he did was go 19 for 25, 378 yards, and 5 touchdowns, all in the first half, I might add, in a 38-35 win at Missouri S&T.
Yeah, Tom, you and I were both pretty bullish on Bowen last year, and they didn't get off to a great start the offense this year for the Wildcats, but I think we're kind of starting to see some of that emergence with them going forward, and they're going to be a real threat for a playoff spot, I think, as we continue.
All right, the NSIC standings after 4 weeks. There are 4 teams that are unbeaten. 3 of them are nationally ranked. That would be Bemidji, actually Mankato, Bemidji, and Duluth in that order. Augie is the 4th unbeaten team. There are 3 winless squads, Concordia, St. Paul, Minot, and Mary. Everybody else is in between. Anybody knock your socks off so far through 4 weeks?
Well, I would say, both Mankato and Bemidji have kind of, in my opinion, from what I've seen, they've kind of separated a little bit from the others. I just think that they've looked like two clear-cut top 10 teams nationally. It also feels like, it's been a little while since the conference has had two teams in the top 10 nationally. Duluth also jumped into our D2football.com top 25 as the final team in the mix. And I had voted for them on my ballot as well, so I was very good with that. And, I would argue that Augie is probably in that next five or so teams just outside of the mix. And, with the win against Sioux Falls, maybe they end up vaulting in next week as well.
Let's recap week 4. The NSIC picked up another win versus a non-conference opponent to improve to 5-1 versus outside competition. But before we get to that, we will begin with the game I did. Minot State at Sioux Falls. Cougars were heavily favored. They won, but it wasn't easy. 7-0 the final. Only points came 2:54 to go, third quarter. Adam Mullen connected with Jalen Taylor from 14 yards out on a pass that could have and should have probably been intercepted. It wasn't. USF wins its 10th in a row over Minot State, limiting the Beavers to just 201 yards of offense. This a week after Minot ran for 270 against Mankato. The Sioux Falls defense played much better. Same can't be said for the offense, despite junior Dylan Rudnigan notching a second 100-yard game on the ground.
Yeah, Tom, leaving the Duluth game, you wouldn't probably have guessed that this was going to happen with the Cougars. I thought this game, was for people who enjoy offense, this was bowling shoe ugly. And I thought Sioux Falls, frankly, was kind of fortunate that Minot, fumbled a bit at the doorstep just before half. I thought there was great fight in Minot. And, I had a coach message me on Saturday night and said, they don't play like a winless squad. And, I think that's kudos to Coach Shields and his group.
Yep. A triple option. You had to watch your quarterback, the wing backs, the dive back intently to know who had that football. All right. So that was the first game. Game 2 was in Sioux Falls as well. MSU Moorhead tried valiantly, but was not able to spoil Augustana's homecoming. The final was 31-27. Vikings got out early, 21-6 at the half on the legs of Jared Epperson. He scored twice in the first half. But the Dragons, they didn't capitulate. Moorhead stayed within striking distance only to come up a wee bit short. I bet you Jack Strand had to have his arm iced on the bus ride home. He hoisted 67 pass attempts in that game.
Yeah, and I think he's pretty impressive when you watch him, Tom. They have a really good precision short passing game, and the running game's actually kind of coming along as well. I think they're going to be a dangerous team going forward. I thought Augie, looked better than worse. But if they're going to be a playoff team, they're going to need to come under 27 points, unless the Augie offense is going to be really prolific and start scoring 40 a game.
Next up, Concordia St. Paul. The Golden Bears traveled over to Minnesota State Mankato. Treated less than hospitably, if you ask me. Mavericks won at 42-10. They've been dominant this young season, but the Golden Bears stayed within striking distance again for a while, trailing 21-10 at the half in this one. After the break, MSU broke things open. Quarterback Hayden Eckern, 2 touchdown passes. In the contest, running back Sheen Butler-Lawson, the number 1 guy in the league this year, a single yard shy of 200 on the ground, and he also scored twice.
Kind of just another day at the office to some extent for Mankato. They're bringing back a lot of the old school Mankato, and Sheen Butler-Lawson, another big day. Defense plays well. They're moving themselves into that top 5 conversation nationally. And this is just further proof of it.
Well, the next score on the scoreboard and the outcome shocked the bejesus out of me. Northern State at Winona State. The Warriors were 39-16 winners. Well, Anthony Vespo returned at quarterback for Northern State, but he found the sledding tough against a hard-charging Winona State defense that sacked him 6 times. And it was the best of times for the Winona State offense. Quarterback Cole Stenstrom, 18 of 25, 270 yards, 2 touchdowns, no picks. Nearly 500 yards of offense for Winona, which, by the way, is unbeaten at home. in the Brian Bergstrom era, which is all of a season and a half.
You know what, Tom? I've been critical, obviously, of the Winona offense because I kind of think that they've been leaving their defense out there, to kind of take care of business, and I think their defense is going to give a lot of teams problems. But the offense did step up in this game, and they had balance between run and pass, and at the same time, Northern, I kind of thought that they would compete a little bit more in this contest than they did, and it got pretty one-sided. And Winona's real tough at home. I think we got to take note of that.
Okay, continuing on. Another highly regarded team, both in the league and nationally, Bemidji State. Went to Bismarck and won 41-10. Kind of felt like a ho-hum start for the Beavers. They were up 20-10 at half, nothing outrageous. But the Mean Green defense took control the rest of the way. They pitched a shutout the final 30 minutes. They had 6 sacks. Offensively, Brandon Alt, fairly pedestrian, just 14 of 24, 204 yards. But 4 of those babies were touchdowns. And Witt, no interceptions for Alt.
I know. He's getting better at that. I gotta give him credit. I just Bemidji or not, they just kind of had to get past this game. I mean, Mary's in rebuild. We've talked about it. Bemidji's got Mankato right on the horizon here. Get through this game and kind of just move ahead.
All right, I alluded to it at the beginning, and now we're finally getting to it. The non-conference contest.
Yeah,
Wayne State didn't have to play a NSIC foe this weekend. They went to the GLVC and played one of the worst teams in that league. They went to Rolla, Missouri, and escaped 38-35. They bussed 9 hours over to Missouri for a contest that was a tale of 2 halves. Wayne State led 38-14 at the break. I mentioned Nick Bowen, the player of the week, 5 touchdown passes, all in the first half. And then in the second half, after a fireworks demonstration that was, trying to get the crowd into it. Apparently it did.
It worked somehow.
Yeah, the Wildcats allowed 21 unanswered. They were outgained by the Miners after intermission. But S&T, that's a team that's 0-4. They've lost to Upper Iowa, and they threw a scare into Wayne State. Shocked me.
Yeah, I mean, Wayne got out to a big start. Jaden Johnson, is starting to become a big play threat for him again. And this ought to be a wake-up call a little bit to them to have this kind of comeback against them by a team that they should beat 10 times out of 10, if we're being real honest. It's just one of those things where, you think the game's over at halftime and you don't come out with the same effort in the second half. These kind of things can happen.
Yep. But Wayne State emerges 3-1 on the year, and they're back into the NSIC this weekend. We'll preview their game and all the others a little bit later on. All right. Boss's Pizza and Chicken is sponsoring the NSIC Weekly podcast. Boss's owner, Jeremy Seafelt, looking to expand his business operations here in the Midwest. There's many locales within the NSIC and D2 in need of a good pizza and chicken establishment that can double as a neighborhood sports bar for watching the local team. Boss's right now has 10 locations in the upper Midwest, and they are looking to grow. If you'd like to be a potential franchisee, visit bosspizzaandchicken.com. On their homepage there in the upper right corner, click on franchise, the link. Let them know where you heard about becoming a part of the Boss's family. Our little show will get a nice reward. I haven't heard what it is. It's not, I have determined it's not a lifetime supply of ranch dressing, but it could be an unending supply of pizza dough.
There you go.
This weekend, Witt and D2Football.com's owner-operator Brandon Meisner going to be at the Key to the City game on Saturday. But the day before, that's the big game in their mind. Friday the 29th, the 2 big boys will attempt the Boss Hog Pizza Challenge. They have 1 hour, 60 minutes to consume a massive 28-inch pizza with 3 toppings. Legend has it, less than 10% of the 2-person teams who have undertaken the challenge have conquered it. Now, Witt, I need to know, have you and Brandon done any special training for the task at hand? Have you eaten more than usual to expand your big stomachs, or perhaps taken in less so you'll have a huge appetite on Friday?
Well, I have been practicing, and Brandon has told me much the same since he's coming up from Kansas City. Working on the art of eating pizza quickly, kind of folding the pieces in half and trying to just bang them down as quick as we can. I mean, it hasn't been a huge departure from my normal dining experience, but I'm at this point we've talked about so much. I'm like a guy on game day. I'm ready to strap my helmet on and go. Let's do this.
Are you going to chew or just swallow?
Yes.
All right, to repeat, our own little Joey Chestnut, along with D2Football.com's Brandon Meisner, attempt this great eating feat, 3 o'clock Friday afternoon, Boss's Pizza and Chicken on South Minnesota Avenue here in Sioux Falls. It's on the west side of Minnesota, probably about 29th or 30th Street. We sure hope that a contingent of our faithful podcast followers will be there to cheer them on. I'll be in attendance, documenting the event for posterity. I can hear myself now. Oh, the humanity! Are these guys all right? Do we need to call an ambulance?
Oh, boy. By the way, not to, talk about anybody else in this, but we're gonna. Augustana, Elite 100 offensive lineman Blake Larson and fellow teammate Trevor Burkhardt, I have been told, attempted this feat, 300 pounds and 335 respectively, and came up just a little bit short. So we're not going to try and play any football this weekend, but Brandon and I think we can be a little bit better at the eating side of things.
Now the weights, is that yours and Brandon's or Blake Larson's and Trevor Burkhardt's?
That'll be enough.
Those guys must have come directly from the training table if they weren't able to get that pizza down in 60 minutes.
I see.
And we're planning on ice cream after, so save room.
Yeah. So, like the next day, yeah.
Enough about pizza. Let's get back to football. We shall now preview the September 30th games with Massey computer rankings providing the point spread. Remember, this is simply an exhibition. It's not a competition. No wagering.
You can wager.
We open this week's slate with the key to the city game. It's the 11th meeting in the crosstown rivalry between Augustana University and the University of Sioux Falls. And with us to help break down this matchup and the rest of the games, longtime Sioux Falls sports writer Matt Zimmer.
Hey.
Matt was with the Argus Leader for half his life before moving to Sioux Falls Live when he made that switch, I think, probably in January. He continues to cover the South Dakota sports scene. Matt Zimmer, welcome aboard, sir.
How's it going, guys?
Well, Zim, great to have you.
Does Matt with Wiki have incriminating documents that were used to coerce you into making an appearance on this Dog and Pony show?
No, he just neglected to tell me I was going to sit and listen to you guys for 20 minutes before you brought me on.
That's right. You're learning stuff, Zim. You're learning stuff.
For our loyal fan base, Matt's main beat with the Argus was South Dakota State. Now, Mr. Zimmer, how's your role changed with a new employer? What are your duties now at Sioux Falls Live?
It hasn't changed a whole lot. In fact, kind of the whole idea, the pitch, I guess, when they recruited me was, hey, how would you like to keep doing what you do for us? And given how things were starting to go at the Argus Leader and, a lot of traditional newspapers, felt like a good time to bounce because it was getting harder and harder to do the things that I wanted to do. So I took that opportunity and very happy I did it. I'm able to keep doing it because, as you guys know, way back in the day, there was, 5, 6, 7, 8 different sports writers at the Argus Leader, and we were able to do a whole bunch of different things. And those days are long gone. But I've been doing this so long and been around so many different teams and places that's what I wanted to do, is be able to keep, not only cover South Dakota State or not only cover high school football. I like to kind of keep my hands in as many pots as I can. And I have a ton of freedom at Sioux Falls Live. I kind of do what I want. And that's sort of the dream. And, with everything that's happening with South Dakota State athletics right now, obviously that's a big focus. I mean, national championship football team, putting guys in the NFL, both their basketball teams going to NCAA tournaments, their new facilities keep growing. I mean, that athletic department is reaching really, really high levels that are unprecedented for the state of South Dakota. That's all great. But it doesn't mean I don't still have interest in, the NSIC, in high school football, in the indoor football league, the Sioux Falls Canaries baseball, all that. And I get to keep doing that, and that's great. So like just today, the reason I'm an hour late with you guys was I went out to the USF practice in the afternoon and went from there over to Augie, and I'm going to be working on Key to the City stuff this week. And at the same time, getting ready for South Dakota State having their football or conference opener against North Dakota on Saturday in Brookings.
You mentioned you've been doing this for so long. I made the wise acre comment that you've been doing it for half your life. How old are you? How long have you been doing it? And how much longer are you going to continue to do it?
I'm 43. I started at the Argus when I was 23. So I've been doing this for 20 years. I certainly wasn't ready to stop doing it, and am not ready to. But at the same time, I find as I get older, and Tom, I'm sure you run into this a lot too, you get older and the kids stay the same age, and that kind of makes you start thinking about, how long you want to do it or if you should be doing it, that kind of thing. And, I don't know if I necessarily see myself down on the sideline interviewing kids when I'm 75 years old. But, at the same time, I'm not in any hurry to go get what I would consider a real job either. So we'll see, maybe there's a future as an editor or something like that. And I can train my protege to carry on, the legacy of being the one sports writer in South Dakota. So we'll see.
All right. You've been covering this Key to the City game since its infancy back in 2012. Give us the Reader's Digest version of the backstory heading into that first contest 11 years ago now.
It's really hard, I think, to explain to someone outside of the two programs just how much hype there was around it, because I think people kind of think, well, it's Division II. How big of a deal could it really have been? But just the buildup from years of not playing. One of the stories I did that week leading up to the game was a look back at the last time they had played, because it's not like they never played. Correct. Augustana was Division II in the North Central Conference. USF was NAIA in the GPAC and the SDIC before that. And they played every once in a while because, both teams had openings for non-conference games. And I think the last time they played was like sometime in the late 80s or something. Right. And I know Aaron Beavers, a high school coach in town, was on that USF team. So I interviewed him about the game. John Schultz, who's Augustana's radio guy, was a quarterback for the Vikings at the time. And to hear them talk about it, what was wild wasn't so much their memories of the game, but just how there was nothing about it at the time that made it special. There was no hype. There was no, oh, hey, there's this big rivalry game, or even just the curiosity of it. Like, oh, Augie's playing USF. That's kind of weird. There was nothing. Like, it was just this meaningless non-conference game. I think Augie won by a comfortable margin, but neither team was especially good that year. It was very much just a ho-hum game. Let everybody get in, get out, and get ready for your conference games. And then they just never did it again. At the time, there wasn't this sort of like, oh, we're never doing that again. There wasn't any animosity or anything. They just sort of both drifted apart. And in the meantime of that happening, Bob Young came along and turned USF into an NAIA powerhouse. And around the same time that was happening, Augustana wasn't very good. It was struggling to compete in the NCC. So any motivation there would have been to play had gone away. Augie didn't want to play him. And, a lot of times USF people would say, we want to play him. We want Augie. But I also heard a lot of people in USF administration privately admit, we don't really want to play him that bad either. It's one of those things where it's, it was more convenient for the USF side to be able to say, sure, kind of cock off and say, oh, we'd kill you guys. We're an NAIA playoff team. You guys are 4-7 every year. But having to actually go out on the field and do it, I just don't think either team really wanted to do it. And finally, when USF had essentially outgrown the NAIA, which they clearly had between the national championships and not even if they hadn't won a national championship, you guys remember those last few years in the GPAC playing, the Domes and Midland Lutherans and the Concordias and kind of going, this isn't fun for anybody. USF had to try hard to only score 70 points in these games. And
Right.
Kalen DeBoer and his staff were recruiting a different level of athlete. USF had built up their facilities better. It was just clear they had more in common with the Division IIs, with the NSICs, than they did with the GPAC. They eventually made the move up, got accepted into the NSIC. And in 2012, their first game in the NSIC, going up to St. Cloud, I was at that game. I think St. Cloud State was ranked like 17th in the nation or something,
Right.
and USF pounded them. And that was very much a whoa sort of moment. Like, hey, they're not messing around; they mean business. And by the time the Augie and USF finally played that year, again, to try to explain to someone how much hype there was around it, it's hard to. I mean, it's very rare to think of a sub-Division I football game having that much attention. It was like from the Saturday night of the previous week, once those week's games were over, that was all anyone in Sioux Falls was talking about, at least in the sports sort of arena, was Augie and USF. It's finally happening. I think USF was like 6-1 and Augie was like 3-4. Yep. So it wasn't necessarily a battle for first place or anything, but just remembering how much anticipation there was, how much interest there was from alums, particularly from the USF side. So many current USF players, current at the time, told me how much pressure there was, how much pressure they were getting from alums, from family members. You guys have to win this game. It almost felt like too much. It really was crazy how much those guys were putting on themselves. But then, not to skip ahead, because I know you want to get to it, but the game was obviously I was just telling Jerry Olszewski today, one of the best football games I've ever seen in my life at any level. It completely lived up to all that hype. And obviously 10 years later, we're still talking about that game, and that rivalry has continued to be everything everyone hoped it would be.
You know what? It's funny you say that, Matt, about kind of some of that hype with the different sides, because I can remember very clearly with talking with USF folks, they were like, we would destroy Augie if we played and all this. And then I had, like Tyler Schulte, who I was playing softball with, he's like, USF is 13th grade football. And I knew the truth was somewhere in the middle of that, but it was kind of like we had to find out in that first meeting. And guys, we're going to take a look at a few photos from game day, back then. And some of these are kind of humorous. Some of them are, kind of, bring back some memories. I can remember as I was arriving at the stadium for the game, I'm literally turning in to the Elman Center, and this hits me as I'm in the left-hand turn lane. I took a photo of the gal with the screw the coo thing. Zim, I remember sending this to you on my BlackBerry or whatever it was at the time.
And then I tweeted it.
Yeah, because it was like an immediate personification of this is what we have in front of us. Yeah. And I loved it because it was like, okay, things are getting petty in a hurry. The cougar is hanging by the tree in the background. Yeah. I mean, the whole deal. And this was just kind of like, okay, here's where we're going with that. And then, we moved to this part. Z, I'm going to have you throw out some names here because Frederick can't apparently remember all of them. So go across and throw out a few of the big combatants here.
I was impressed that I was able to do this when you showed it to me earlier. But for Augie, that's Isaac Jorgensen, tight end, Josh Hansen, quarterback, Austin Lukey, linebacker. For USF, left to right, we've got quarterback Taylor Perkins, running back Christian Porter, and linebackers Nick Bonney and Eric Anderson.
Right? Yeah, I don't know about you, Zim, but I can remember this moment very vividly because there was almost like goosebumps.
Yes,
everyone was getting as you went from that right into this. And this was the first kick between the squads. You're not seeing a whole lot of empty seats over there. I remember it was a little over 7,000, wasn't it? But yeah.
It was 7,230, something like that.
71.
Yeah. You can't see it in the photo there, but the standing room only was full. The berms were full. The USF side, the visitor side, whatever you want to call it, was full. The press box was full. I mean, it was really hard to get around on the campus that day. And yeah, like it just had a very surreal sort of feel to it. It was this thing that we'd been talking about for so many years. Then we found out it was going to happen. I don't know what, a year, 2 years prior when USF got accepted into the league, and Augie made it pretty clear, we're not going to play you till we have to. We'll play you when you join the league full fledged. So there had been so much buildup. And I remember sitting in the press box in that exact moment that you just showed when the captains are walking out for the coin toss and just kind of having that feeling like, this is really going to happen.
Exactly.
We've been talking about for years and years and years. It's here. Like, this is crazy. Like, you just expected something, like the Mike Tyson Evander Holyfield fight where the guy parachuted in the ring. Like, you just were waiting for some weird thing to come in and almost, is this real? It just was very, again, it's hard to explain to people that weren't there and didn't experience all the buildup to it, just how much anticipation there was for that game and how much of a sense of, we never thought this was going to happen, and here it is, sort of thing.
Yeah. And, then we kind of move into the game, and USF gets a few stops early, gets out to I think a 2-score lead. And it's like, wow, are they really going to do this? Like, is this going to be a one-sided game in this first one they ever play? And then Mr. Hansen and company got going. And we've got, who is this? Ben Parsley, Flandreau guy, if I remember right. He was his main target that day. And all of a sudden, this game got real sticky for USF, and then Augie goes ahead, and things are getting right down to the wire, and they go to kick the field goal at the end. Augie has a chance to win, and we go ahead and we got a block towards the end of the game. Zim, what do you recall about kind of that series as we were moving into overtime and kind of how that all played out?
I remember having 100% confidence in USF's kicker, Braden Weeking.
Yes.
And having very little confidence in Augustana's kicker. And, that's what cost them the game. I mean, you said USF got off to this great start, and you did kind of wonder, wow, are they just that much more jacked up for this game? Are they just that much more, does this rivalry mean that much more to them than it does to Augie, that they're just going to come out here and roll them because they've been waiting so long for this, because there's so much pressure on them. But you have to give Augie a lot of credit. That was an Augustana team that won, 5 games that year? They were not that great of a team.
Right.
But they fought back and played some really, really good football to reestablish control of that game. If I remember right, they badly outgained USF total yardage-wise, but they just kept shooting themselves in the foot, and with none more than the kicking game. I mean, they just couldn't make extra points. And, Josh Hansen, their quarterback, who just played a tremendous football game. I mean, anyone who saw Josh Hansen remembers how tough he was, and how he was, so willing to kind of sacrifice everything for his team. He played so well, but it's also, Josh Hansen was a Division I kicker prospect. Augie could have brought him in to kick at any time, and they didn't want to do it, and they kept riding with the guy, and he just kept letting him down, and it wasn't just that game. His whole career, he really had some struggles he was a great punter, but he couldn't make extra points. He couldn't make clutch field goals. And, when they finally missed that one, and then USF put themselves in position in overtime, okay, all we got to do is score a touchdown and make the extra point. There was no doubt. Everyone knew it was going to happen. And I remember interviewing Braden Weeking after the game. How often do you even interview the kicker? But Braden Weeking was just like, I asked him, were you nervous? He's like, why would I be nervous? It's an extra point. I can make that in my sleep. And it's just like, well, that's why they won and the other team didn't, because their kicker knew how to take care of business, and that was the difference in the game.
Z, do you remember when they ran the tight end delay to Hannah, that play, and he catches it, and then you're going, okay, they're tied now, and Weeking just had to make the extra point. Weeking makes the extra point to end the game, and I remember people are jumping onto the field, ex-players from football alums, storming the field like it's a national championship win, because it meant so much to them to be able to go around town and be able to say, yeah, we are the better team.
I'll never forget it, in part because Jed Stuger got mad at me for writing about it, that the players were and people were jumping over the fence. He thought it made his program look bad, but
well, it happened.
You did, yeah. It was, as much as people on both sides, Augie fans think I'm a USF homer, and USF fans think I'm an Augie homer.
I know.
As much as I always tried as hard as I could to be objective with that rivalry and treat them both equally, it was really hard not to be pulling for USF in that first game, just because of how badly they had wanted it, how they had accomplished so much as a program, and yet there were still people who didn't respect them, people in Sioux Falls who just didn't take what they had accomplished seriously, didn't want to give them the credit they had earned. Even after they beat North Dakota in 2009, I remember when that game was played, people commenting on articles and sending me emails saying, USF's going to lose 80-0. This is embarrassing. They're going to show everyone finally what a joke of a program they are. And then they went and absolutely dominated North Dakota. And you'd think that would have, changed the narrative forever, but it only did for a little while. It didn't take long before people were right back to, well, who cares? They're NAIA. And, being on the field, talking to those players, talking to a lot of the ex-players, the coaches, the fans. I mean, I don't need to remind you guys how many people were in tears, how many people, that meant so, so much to them. And it's nothing against Augustana from the top of the program all the way down to their players and coaches and fans. It just didn't mean as much to them. If anything, I was impressed that Augustana did as well as they did to meet that, to try to match that intensity, because there's no way they could have summoned what USF had on their side, the desire, the want to, how much it meant to them. And when that game ended and all those people ran onto the field, I mean, it's cliche, but that's one of those moments that you never forget. And in large part because you knew that it was about much more than 32-31. It was about everything that had transpired in the history of those two programs for years and years and years.
Well, Zim, obviously we're not going to review each game, but the Cougars have won 8 of the 10 contests. The Vikings did capture the key in 2015 and then in 2019. In 2015, Luke Papillion and company, I thought that was probably, in my opinion, maybe the second biggest game in this series. USF gets out to a big start. Looks like it could have been one of those, hey, is this going to be a one-sided game, 14-0 lead? And then all of a sudden, Augie, despite a bunch of turnovers, came back. Brandon Moore only got to play one half, their great linebacker. Remember, he had he had punishment from the game before for targeting or what have you. He came back in the second half and made a bunch of tackles. And this guy had a big run at the end, CJ Ham, and maybe what I would think is possibly his biggest performance, all things considered, 150 yards and a few scores, and the big one at the end, 35-28. Zim, do you recall in watching that one, do you kind of recall, wow, this is going to change the narrative a little bit for Augie here?
I wasn't at that one. The Jacks had a game that day and I couldn't watch it. But obviously I was following it very closely.
Sure.
And I remember after the game talking to, my various friends and sources on both sides. And the general consensus was just, hey, CJ Ham's a special player and he took over. The Vikings put the game in his hands, so to speak, and watched him do it. And it's funny now, 6, 7, 8, 9 years later, however long it's been, now the CJ Ham game has sort of become the shorthand for that meeting, the 2015. People just call that the CJ Ham game, in part because, we saw what happened after that. He goes on to have an all-pro career in the NFL. We didn't know that at the time. But, that's one of those signature moments from superstar players. And, you need things like that to make a rivalry be what this rivalry is. Yeah, it's great to have, big crowds and have the games be meaningful because both teams are in the playoff race and all those other things. But, you want to have characters in the rivalries, big names that you remember. And obviously from the Augustana side, there's no bigger one. Like I said, it's the CJ Ham game. And, people know him now for being a Minnesota Viking, but you ask anyone, who knew him before then, and that's what they talk about is 2015 when, what did Augie have, like 3 interceptions or something? I mean, they kept turning the ball over and eventually, they just decided, let's stop messing around and give it to our future NFL running back. And he won that game for him.
For all those watching, we're kind of going back and giving some historical perspective to this game. There's a lot of people who weren't watching these games back 10 years ago. Since that time, Matt, who are some of the other players you think of that had some bigger performances or some other notable moments that you have in the series that come to mind? One that came to mind for me was a guy that doesn't get talked about a lot anymore, Nephi Garcia. He had 2 big games against Augie in both 13 and 14. Is there any other moments, players, situations that come to mind for you?
I think of, as far as moments, the game a couple years ago where I think was it 2019? No, I think it was 2021 when Augustana was probably favored to win that game, and they were in control most of the way, botched a play on special teams, and then late in the game, all of a sudden USF it felt like they sort of stole the lead, but they left enough time for Augustana. But late in the game, Kyle Sadler throws an interception. And all of a sudden it's like, wow, USF's going to walk out of here with a win. That was one of you mentioned, 2012 is obviously the crown jewel of this rivalry. I agree with you that 2015 is probably number 2. For me, that one was probably number 3. That was such a well-played game. USF just hadn't been playing very well that year going into it. And so I think that was the biggest contingent of Augustana fans we ever saw come to Bob Young Field, because I think they felt like, hey, we're going to get to see our guys win one here. And USF just rose up and played their best game of the year in that one. So that one's always going to be real memorable for me. As far as individual players, it's really hard not to go back to that 2012 team, because so many of those guys were such characters, and especially the ones that had been a part of the tail end of the NAIA era. You got to know some of those guys a little bit better because the season went so long. They're always playing into December. And I think back to, guys like Eric Anderson, guys like Christian Porter, guys like Braden Weeking, who I got to know really well, and who shared a lot with me in that 2012 season about, sort of the outside stuff and how much everything that they were doing meant to them. That, it's not about necessarily trying to make the Division II playoffs or whatever, just kind of carrying the weight of the entire USF program on their backs that year. And, the transition from Kalen to Jed and all of that. I think that's why, you showed me that picture of the captains for both sides walking out to the middle of the field. I kind of surprised myself that I was able to identify all those guys. I wouldn't be able to do that for 2014 or 15 or 16. That 2012 team, I think was special because of how they were sort of the first ones. Because, what if that team went 4-7? Who knows what would have happened to USF football if they hadn't been able to make that good first impression in Division II and kind of ease everyone's mind that, yes, this move's going to work. This program's going to be okay. They're going to keep playing winning football, even though they moved up to the Division II level.
Tom, how about yourself? You've been on the mic for all 10 of these games. We've discussed some of what we saw as the bigger moments. What comes to your mind?
Well, first off, it's that 2015 game to me, outside of the first one, of course, 32-31 and the extra sessions there. But in 2015, the Cougars forced, I think, 4 or 5 turnovers. They scored, for crying out loud, 3 defensive touchdowns and end up losing 35-28. That stands out. And I suppose the other one, they've all run together after a while. I suppose 2018, the most lopsided game in the series, 51-13. That was memorable as well because Gabe Watson ran for 4 scores.
That was kind of the only one-sided one in the mix, wasn't it, guys?
It was.
The second one wasn't one-sided, but it was really a bad football game. That was OJ's first year, and he was clearly, kind of rebuilding and trying to reshuffle the deck, and they weren't ready to win yet. And that was just an ugly game. I think USF won like 20-10, or that one to me is by far the worst, other than maybe the blowout, the 51-13.
Yeah, I mean, I thought the one where Eli Weber had the big pick at the end to seal it for the Vikings was at 19. I thought that was a big one. And then last year, I thought there was a pretty electric feel at KO, and it was kind of the thorough show and the defensive line from USF kind of getting home early and often. And, to some extent, right, this rivalry, the history of this is kind of written by the victors, and USF has kind of had the pen for much of this series. And, now we kind of move into that next, grouping of them now that we got 10 in. But before we do that, I know that Tom has a little bit of trivia for us, Zim. He's going to try and buzz our tower here a little, I think.
Well, you always like to play a little NSIC Jeopardy with me to see what my knowledge base is.
I gotcha.
we're going to go over the key to the city here. Just 3 questions. We'll see how you guys fare. Number 1, it's pretty easy. Name the rusher with the most yards in the series, not in one game, but total.
Thorough.
You know what? I'm going to say Garcia, only he was there 2 years, but it probably is Thorough. What do you got?
CJ Ham, 67 carries, 329 yards, 4 games.
Well, we're off to a good start.
Number 2, how many starting quarterbacks has each side had in the series?
Oh, bloody hell. Okay, Zim, we're going to work on this together. You ready?
Yeah.
USF would have had Taylor Perkins,
1,
Luke,
Carrington Hannah.
yeah, Hannah, then Luke, Ian Feber.
Oh, yeah, geez. Caden
Yeah,
Walters.
that's the one that Frederick didn't think we were going to get. Mullen
Caden Walters.
and Walters, right? That would be
6.
6. We're going to go with 6 on that side. Are we right on that, Tom?
You are correct. Give me
Okay.
the
Now,
Augustana.
Augie won't be as hard. Augie won't be as hard because Sadler and Hyde take up most of that window.
Yeah,
it's
Sadler and Hyde. Josh
Casey-
Hansen.
Well, Casey Bauman this last year.
Yeah.
I think that's it.
Just be those 4.
You know what? I thought about did the Ryan Rubley, who was here for a year from Tulsa, but I think he was hurt by that point. He got hurt because I think Sadler had to play that game.
Yeah.
4 starts for Hyde, 4 starts for Sadler, 1 for Hansen, 1 for Bauman. Total of 4 quarterbacks.
Tom, you didn't think we were going to get that one. I didn't think we were going to get that one.
All right. 3rd and final. You ready? There's been one game where one team had multiple players gain 100 yards or more rushing the football.
Oh,
And
boy.
there's been one game where one team had 2 receivers with more than 100 yards of production. Name the years, name the players.
It's not the same year.
Not the same year, not the same team.
Well, 2015, I'm going to say Ham and Hyde because they had a bunch of yards in that game. And receivers, I would guess something like Heller and Hayes, maybe a year later. Zim, those were kind of the biggest yardage games I can recall.
Papillion and Garcia. 100-yard rushing games. Who's that big receiver Augie had that had transferred from NDSU?
Weber?
Engel.
No, Engel. Yeah, Sean. Is it Sean Engel? I think.
Sean Engel.
Yeah, he could be in there. I want to say I thought he had a big game against USF once.
All right. Whit, you caught me here.
I got it.
I made a mistake.
Oh.
There's been 2 games where multiple players have gained 100 yards or more on the ground.
That's a great question. Anyway,
One of them was Hyde and Ham.
Ham and Hyde. The other, Colton Miles, Gabe Watson, 2018.
Okay.
And then the receivers with more than 100 yards in a game. I think you hit them, Whit.
Heller and Hayes.
Heller and Hayes in 2015, that same year that Ham and Hyde did a number on the Cougars. So
Jesus,
you guys either have memories like elephants, or you should have done just a wee bit more prep maybe before this recording session.
I think we did pretty good.
Yeah. One last thought here. Is this the first game ever where coaches whose last names end in ski are facing each other?
Easy with the Polish jokes.
In this series, yes.
Yeah. All right.
And by the way, one last thing, Tom, before I forget, we do have some proof of you with the key. Have I shown you this? Oh, what happened to the hair?
Look at Tim Hyatt. He looks like a little boy. That had to be 2012 right there. That's the first one. No, look at
there's a few notches on the key, so I'm thinking that's like 16 or something, isn't it?
Ooh. My, how times have changed.
Well, and you know what? We've actually kind of moved that into today. And there you are today, Tom.
That's good.
So I'm not saying, I'm just saying. But okay, let's move on to our picks if we can, my friend.
All right. Since we've finished strolling down memory lane regarding the key to the city, it's time to pick the winner in this year's contest as well as the rest of this weekend's encounters. First, Jim, you had a chance to attend practice. I saw you out of the corner of my eye down at Bob Young Field earlier tonight. Then you went over to Kirkby Over Stadium. What's your feel after attending practices leading up to game day?
It's very similar to what it always is, in that USF is confident because of how well they've always played in this game. They know that they're not the better team this year. They know that, they're working under a new coach. They're still kind of finding themselves. They only beat Minot State by 7 last week. They know that all things being equal, they should lose this game. But they also know, hey, we know how to win in this series. We kind of have these guys' number. There's just this sense of when we play Augie, we know we're going to play well. We know we've got a great chance to win. They expect to win. On the flip side of it, I don't think Augustana's, lacking confidence or that they're afraid of USF or anything, but they're well aware of what the record is in this series, and they're well aware of how much this game means to the Cougars. I had 2 Augustana players today tell me point blank, like, USF could be 0-10, and we would respect them coming into that game because we know they play their best when they play against us. Sure. So there isn't going to be any, Augie's like, oh, well, we're 4-0 and they're 2-2. There's not going to be any of that. And then I think also one thing you have to consider with both of these teams is, yeah, Augie's 4-0 and USF's 2-2, but Augie hasn't played anybody, and they, had some trouble with Moorhead last week. I think they probably feel like they have not played as well as they had hoped to. I thought they'd be a little bit better than they've been so far, but they're 4-0. You can't complain about that. USF's 2-2, and again, last week only beating Minot by 7 was weird, but they hung in there with a really good Duluth team, and even Mankato, they got run over, but it wasn't like they were completely overmatched or anything. I mean, there's been a lot of positives for USF. They're just, again, first-year coach, a bunch of new players. They're still trying to figure things out. So I think everyone is expecting this to go how it usually goes, which is, a close competitive game, an intense game. And I think just as USF could probably admit to themselves that Augustana deserves to be the favorite, I think Augustana understands, hey, we should win this game. We're the better football team objectively right now. Whether it plays out that way, I mean, we've seen it before. It isn't always the team with the best record that wins that game.
This is the 3rd straight year that the Vikings come into the contest 4-0. The first 2 times they departed 4-1. Their early schedule, you alluded to it, not very strong. It's going to get harder starting Saturday. I'm anxious to see if the USF defense continues to improve and whether the offense simply had an off day last week against Minot. Vikings' 2 wins in the series have been at the Bob in games in which they turned it over 5 times and only had 133 yards of offense in the other. They still got a W. I think USF holds serve, though, on Saturday, moves to 3-2 on the season. They've not been under 500 after 5 games since 2011. I don't see it this week either. I think Sioux Falls pulls it out. Jim, what's your take?
I like Augustana, 24-19.
Oh, he's going with a score, Whit. I don't do that, but
I saw that. That was kind of impressive. That was
Massey.
He had that thing in the barrel ready to go too.
2-point spread is all.
Coach Flo told me he thinks that they should be 2 touchdown dogs. So
I mean, I think you could make a case that
you could 4-0
Augie probably should be it. I mean, Zim, don't you think you could make a case that Augie's a 10-point favorite here?
I was going to say, if I was going to set a spread, I'd probably set it at 10.
Well, okay. Massey come up with 2 then. That's ridiculous.
Because they know the history of the rivalry, I guess.
Yeah, Massey's smarter than we realized, Tom. But, I've gone back and forth on this one quite a bit, guys. USF tends to show kind of their growl and teeth a bit more in this clash than the Vikings have. And, that's carried the day, I think, a few times when maybe Augie's had some better talent. If USF's going to escape this one, I think that they're going to need to rely on that short to medium passing game. And I think Cam Dean's going to have to make some plays with his feet. I think the, USF running game with Runnigan's gotten going a little bit, but I think they're going to need more than that in this contest. I think when Augie has the ball, I think they're going to be able to hit a good amount of chunk plays with Bauman. I think he might have a clean pocket. USF has only gotten 2 sacks this year. And I think just coming into this, Augie is I think the favorite because the fact that They have more veteran presence, experience than a very young Sioux Falls team that I think is kind of still developing. So I have Augustana in this one.
Is that a carbonated beverage or an adult beverage you're drinking? Just curious.
I have my sponsorship through
my
NIL contract.
Got it.
They need to get you. That's a good point.
I just got water here. It's a family show on this.
After 8:00, that's when,
Fair point. Yes.
Whit, bring up the schedule, man. Come on.
Oh, good point. Yeah. I thought we were just going to talk for a little bit.
We got another game we want to review here.
Yeah. So what do you got next? Northern State and Moorhead.
Yep. And Moorhead is a slim 2-point favorite at home, according to Massey. After last week's outcomes, Northern losing big at Winona, Augie throwing a scare into Augustana. Man, I picked Northern before the season started, but I got to go with the Dragons in this one, I think.
You know what, Tom? In this one, Northern looks a little discombobulated right now. I just kind of expected them to compete a little bit better against some of the top eights and kind of have things a little more ironed out at quarterback. I liked what I saw out of Moorhead. I think they're a dangerous team. I'm going to take them at home in this one.
Jim?
Yeah, I like Moorhead too. Something's not right up at Northern. I thought they were going to be a little bit better than this. And it looks like maybe Moorhead, they're always kind of one of those middle of the pack teams. They never stink, but they're never a playoff team. Looks like they're maybe a little better this year than some of their previous teams, especially being at home. I'd be surprised if Northern won that one.
Next up, another noon kickoff at Seafoam Stadium. They're on Hamlin Avenue in St. Paul. Concordia St. Paul hosting U Mary. Golden Bears are favored by 6, according to Massey. This is the first of 2 straight home games for the Bears. I'll be there next week with USF. I see CSP notching their second win of the season to go with that Upper Iowa victory earlier. Zim?
Yeah, I like Concordia in that one.
We've kind of talked about this, Tom. I think Concordia is playing a little bit better than their record. I expect them to kind of have this in a one-sided victory, but that'll go ahead and notch them up a little bit more. And I think they're gonna be game against some of that upper and middle pack as well.
Another high noon start at Molosky Stadium in Duluth. Winona State against the 25th ranked Bulldogs. A week ago, I'd have said UMD easily, but not so fast, my friend, is what would say. Winona appears to be better than I thought. Warriors will need to count for Kyle Waljasper the moment he steps out of the locker room. USF could not do that 2 weeks ago. But I believe the Bulldog quarterback and his mates will emerge from this one unbeaten yet, 5-0.
Yeah, I'm sorry to say to my friends on the Warrior coaching staff, but I like the Bulldogs in this one too.
I really wanted to go with Winona on this. I was pleased with how their offense played this last week, and I just can't do it. I think Duluth's going to throw them some blitzes and kind of get them a little frazzled. And I want to see how Winona defends Waljasper, but I still got to take Duluth at home.
Wayne State is a 24-point favorite at Minot. I can't see Wayne losing this game, but I didn't anticipate the Beavers playing USF to 7-0 last week either. Wayne to win, but 24 is a lot of points to cover.
I'd be, a lot of times you see where a team like Minot, who's supposed to get killed by somebody, and then they play them tough and almost win, and you go, oh, maybe they're turning a corner. A lot of times they fall flat the week after that because it, kind of took everything out of them to pull off that near miss. I could be wrong. I don't know a whole lot about Minot State, but just based on how that game went and how good Wayne State is, I expect the Wildcats to win that game comfortably.
I'm waiting for Wayne to kind of, reassert themselves and kind of start to look more like that playoff team I think they can be. I think it starts here. I'll take them in a one-sided game.
We've got a non-conference affair here to discuss. Southwest Minnesota State at Valparaiso, an FCS non-scholarship school. It looks like Valpo is favored by 7. Northwestern of the Great Plains Athletic Conference 2 weeks ago defeated FCS non-scholarship Drake. If SMSU gets Valpo, it would be similar in my mind. I don't expect that to happen, but then again, I must admit, I didn't delve into Valpo's bona fides at all for this one.
Tom, funny story here. Valparaiso is one of the schools that expressed interest in me as a football recruit way back when.
Scholarship.
Now, I am the guy on the far left who is not that same weight right now. I was about 6'2", 220 then, and some of my teammates were being recruited, maybe more than I was. So I was maybe getting some residual love, I think. But no, I've kind of gone back and forth on this a little bit. Valpo lost to Indiana Wesleyan, who's a top 5 NAI program. But at the same time, they're non-Scully. It's a long road trip, and I just don't have enough faith right now in the Mustang offense. So I'm going to take Valpo at home.
I think Valpo will win too, but I will say Scott Underwood has taken some teams and played up before and usually got a good showing out of his team. I would expect Southwest State to be in that football game maybe for longer than we think, but I think Valpo will win.
Yep.
All right, lastly, the marquee matchup, the game of the week in the Northern Sun. That's Minnesota State, number 5 in the country, at number 7, Bemidji State. Mankato, a road favorite. Massey says in a pick'em game, I guess. They favor the Mavericks by 1. So far, these two squads have looked like the class of the league. They were picked by the coaches of the top 2 teams in the conference in the preseason poll. Both won playoff games a year ago. They're in the top 10. I went back and looked at how I picked this one before the season started. Bemidji was my choice then. Both squads are 4-0. They've not been seriously challenged. Since this one is in Bemidji, I'm going to go with the Beavers, who last got Mankato in 2016. Zim, who do you like in this one?
I got to take Mankato. I don't want to say that I'm not a believer in Bemidji because obviously they've been doing this for long enough now to where I think they belong in that conversation with the Duluths and Mankatos as heavyweights in the NSIC. But I'm not quite ready to say necessarily that they're on the same level of a Mankato. I just think I know just a couple of years ago, Mankato went 6-5. They're not invincible either, but I think just based on their history and how used to being in this position they are in a game like this, I'm going to give a slight edge to them. I just feel like until someone knocks them off, they're the team to beat in the NSIC. So I'm really looking forward to seeing how this one plays out, but also just, knowing the style of play how Mankato plays, if things get dicey or whatever, I mean, they're just going to run the ball right down your throat and make you stop them. And I think that's the formula for success, especially in big games like this. So I like the Mavs.
I'm impressed by how Mankato's obviously returned into this kind of the old school ground and pound. Got a great running back who can be a home run hitter too. However, I do think it's time for Bemidji to win a game of this magnitude. The Beavers are the top team in the conference against the rush and averaging about 2.5 a carry against them. And I think their secondary is good enough to hold up against some deep shots against the Mavs. I'm going to take Bemidji winning at home and a heck of a ball game, and that very, very well may be the game of the year in the Northern Sun.
Went through 4 weeks. What are the standings? How much you got me by?
Well, I'm not one to pat myself on the back, but I am 29-0, and you are 27-2. So I think we've done fairly well, but I think the games are going to start getting harder here with weeks like the one we have in front of us.
Matt Zimmer, where can our faithful podcast followers keep up to speed with you? Give us your social media handles and where to locate your stories these days, if you would.
I am on Twitter at Matt J. Zimmer. And if you haven't bookmarked it or aren't familiar with it yet, SiouxFallsLive.com is the place to be. I don't think there's anyone in Sioux Falls doing a better job covering local sports than we are. So SiouxFallsLive.com, please check it out.
Well, that is a wrap for Season 2, Episode 6. The NSIC Weekly Podcast is a production of D2Football.com. Join the D2 community every Sunday night at 7 for an intense look at Division II football on X, formerly Twitter. You can also find it on YouTube. They'd love for you to check them out. Our thanks to Matt Zimmer, sports writer for Sioux Falls Live, for joining the festivities. And to Nick Cornder, Big Nick, up at the NSIC home office for the website info. Our little skipper throws up on the screen there as eye candy each week. For Iron Stomach Matt Witwicky, this is Tom Frederick. See you next month. It'll be October the next time an NSIC weekly podcast is released. See you then.
Thanks.